Goeiedag. Good day, fellow South Africans. And look, if I can go through 90 minutes of the attached video, then so can you, because I'm in Australia and this affects you if you're in South Africa. And the reason I went through the whole thing is because it's an absolutely extraordinary media event, where you've got the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, stating quite clearly that they have failed in the past. And this is the new NPDD, I think her name is, or her title is. And you'll see this in the attached video. But she makes some very, very interesting points. And the ones that really caught my eye, where she said that the NPA has been deliberately underfunded so that it could not do its job. And secondly, that there is an enormous amount of corruption in South Africa that needs to be investigated. It is quite an astounding interview. And, you know, if you've got 90 minutes to spare during the day, please watch the video attached here. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. It is quite incredible. Please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell to get the updates, and have a great day. And I hope to see you Sunday night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, for the great debate.
Everyone, doesn't seem like the mic is on. No. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I think that will work. Thank you. Thank you. That's better, I think. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members of the media. I'll make a reasonably short address, and then Advocate Cronje will have a few words to say, and then we'll be ready to take questions and answers. So it's been almost 4 months since I briefed the media on the 1st of February, the first day that I took office. And I really want to thank you for your patience. I had intended to brief you all sooner, but I didn't quite appreciate the depth and extent of the challenges, both internal and external, that I'd be facing in trying to revitalize the National Prosecuting Authority. I am the 7th NDPP, or acting NDPP, over the last decade. Over this period, the NPA has experienced, as has been publicly revealed, politically motivated changes in leadership, allegations of impropriety against some of its leadership, an exodus of skilled staff, a hiring freeze, a virtual end to its professional development and training programs, and a fiscally induced vacancy rate that has brought the NPA's operations close to collapse in some centers. I have in the past 4 months been listening, understanding, engaging at various levels, and attending to various priorities that were identified. And these include, and in no particular order of priority, addressing the NPA leadership crisis. This, as I said when I took office, is critical to restoring the credibility of the NPA. The NPA needs a fresh, new, dynamic leadership. I made important changes that were widely reported on, and I won't repeat, but more needs to be done. However, for various reasons, this has not been as quick or as easy as I would have liked it to be. But important progress will be made shortly. Secondly, the conduct of reviews of high-profile cases relating to decisions to prosecute or not to prosecute. This will also assist in restoring the credibility of the NPA. In this regard, we have identified a number of cases, including those investigated by IPID, which we are reviewing. A review of the structure of the NPA. To improve effectiveness, I have decided on a decentralized model, which is in line with the NPA Act, with a small, specialized, highly skilled capacity at the national office to actively support prosecutors in the regions. This will build more capacity in the regions, maintaining specialization, for example, with regard to the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court, terrorism, and other crime types that may be identified, for example, like cybercrime. Obtaining more budget for the NPA. This is a very, very serious problem for the NPA and for criminal justice. There has been no recruitment in the NPA since 2016. The impact on the delivery of justice and the morale of prosecutors working in extremely challenging conditions is huge. We will not be able to deliver the service that the people deserve and expect, or effectively deal with holding persons accountable for crimes that is outside of the investigating directorate if the situation persists. This is one of the key issues to be discussed with the new Minister of Justice. Managing cases relating to state capture, including the creation of the investigating directorate, has been a key priority, which I will deal with later. The challenges we face have provided opportunities to begin the complex process of revitalizing and repairing the NPA. Together with the leadership of the NPA, I have also been working on a number of other important priorities and issues. Partnership engagement. And in this regard, I would like to recognize our National Commissioner as well as the head of the Hawks. We have been working very, very closely together, and we'll elaborate on that in a bit. To achieve our vision, the NPA must collaborate with its governmental partners, including particularly the police and the courts. I have made it one of my priorities to reach out to our partners and candidly discuss challenges, and there are many, which have impeded effective cooperation. I have met with the police commissioner, and we've had an extremely constructive and positive discussion about how to move things forward. I have had several meetings with Lieutenant General Sitoli, the head of the Hawks. We all recognize that there are huge challenges in law enforcement, including in the prosecutions. For example, lack of skills, lack of discipline, corruption, etc. And these all have to be addressed. However, we have been working very closely to address various priority cases. We've also been working with the Financial Intelligence Center, the Special Investigating Unit, and the South African Revenue Service, amongst others. Stakeholder engagement. I have sought to reach out to the business sector and civil society groups, which represent important constituencies in South Africa. My outreach efforts include South Africa's development partners, including the foreign diplomatic community, who are watching very carefully whether we can reverse the effects of years of state capture in order to place South Africa back on a positive development and economic trajectory, to restore the rule of law and build confidence in our institutions. Strengthening morale and empowering the NPA staff. On my first day in office, I requested that a staff survey be undertaken. New in my position as NDPP, I wanted to hear from everyone in the NPA. The NPA succeeds or fails on the ability, skills, and knowledge of our people, our greatest asset and resource. To succeed, we must nurture and empower all our people's skills. To this end, I'm undertaking numerous visits to our regional and local offices across the country to meet with, to listen to prosecutors and staff working at the coalface of the criminal justice system. I've asked for a review of the NPA's professional development and training capacity to ensure that we have the human resources and skills to be the cutting-edge prosecution service that we can all be proud of, ready to meet the challenges it faces. Create a strategic support and innovation capacity in the office of the NDPP. My office will draw in skills and resources, including private sector and international experts, to provide capacity to the NDPP's office to focus on longer-term strategic issues, trends and challenges facing the NPA and criminal justice. It will also serve as an innovation hub to new and creative solutions to intractable operational and institutional challenges facing the NPA as well as the criminal justice system. So what is my vision? It isn't really my vision, because listening to the prosecutors, I realized that we all share the same vision, and that is to rebuild and lead a trusted and effective prosecution service that pursues justice for all South Africans through independent, professional, and victim-centered service delivery. This vision depends on 4 key pillars: credibility, independence, professionalism, and accountability. An important role that the NPA has to fulfill is to undertake effective prosecutions. The country is crying out for this. But the NPA is about much more than only prosecuting cases in court, long after crimes have been committed. The work of the NPA must and will make an effective contribution to the country's socio-economic development. In addition to all the other crime types that the NPA has to focus on, including sexual and gender-based crimes, corruption, as we all know, has become endemic in our society. There is, understandably, tremendous hunger and impatience for justice, and the expectations for immediate arrests are high. The proclamation of the Investigation Directorate is an important step to restoring the rule of law in South Africa. The SAPS and the NPA are working closely to ensure that we are able to address the scourge of corruption in our society and in our country at different levels. The Provincial Commissioner has committed his full support and the support of SAPS to the work of the Investigating Directorate. And as I said, you can see that both General Labia and the National Commissioner are here. I am pleased to introduce you today to Advocate Hermione Cronje. While many of you will have seen from other media reports that her academic and professional qualifications and past work experience more than qualify her for the position of Investigating Director, I want to assure you that having worked with her in the past when we were both in the NPA in the early 2000s and then again over the past 2 months, I have absolute confidence that she has the temperament, the resolve, and the commitment to make a success of this hugely challenging assignment. She is passionate, astute, and will fiercely defend the rule of law. If anyone can do this job, I know she can. As you know, Advocate Cronje has been working closely with Advocate Johnson, who is also present here, over the past months in getting to grips with what progress is being made within the NPA to hold accountable those implicated in corruption. They will continue to work through which of the cases would be referred to the Investigating Directorate and which cases will remain with the prosecutors, particularly in the Specialized Commercial Crime Unit. It is therefore also vital that outside of the Investigating Directorate, other cases of serious corruption which the NPA will have to deal with, together with the SAPS, which are destroying our communities and have eroded public trust in state officials, also receive the necessary attention and resources. The establishment of the Directorate will immensely strengthen the capacity to address corruption. However, I want to caution that complex cases take a while to investigate properly. And as you know, many cases have been neglected for many years, and we cannot fail with the cases that we bring to court. But I am confident that those responsible will be held accountable. We will relentlessly pursue the course of justice and respect for the rule of law, and respect for the rule of law will prevail. And so thank you, ladies and gentlemen. At this point, it gives me pleasure to hand over to Advocate Cronje, who will give you some more detail about the Investigating Directorate and how it will work. Thank you. You want to maybe... yeah.
Morning, everyone. Oh, I have to move there.
Oh, you may... Okay.
I'm already unseating.
I can see that.
So where's the... Oh, yes. Morning, everyone. So it's better. Yeah. Thanks. I was warned not to put my glasses on my head, and that's the first thing I did. So you see, I'm not good with following instructions. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very grateful to the NDPP for the confidence that she has expressed in my ability to do this job. I'm also encouraged by the support and commitment received from the generals right next to us. I'm also profoundly humbled, as well as energized by the positive response with which the announcement of my appointment has been received. Also a little curious and surprised. But I can assure you that the decision to accept this enormous challenge is not one that I took lightly, by any means. I am aware of the enormity of the task, and you've heard from the NDPP the extent of that challenge. And just to agree that I'm aware that our institutions are in a poor state, particularly the institutions represented at this table. I'm also aware of the problem in our state-owned enterprises and the need to send a strong message that those who pocket for their own personal gain funds earmarked for the development of our country and for meeting the needs of our people will face the consequences of their actions. And of course, I'm aware of the need to restore confidence in the institutions of government, particularly at the highest level. I'm also aware, and the NDPP has explained, the constraints that we face. We will need to rebuild the skill and capacity, and you've heard the NDPP's plans in that regard. I'm also fully aware of the expectations of ordinary South Africans. Very high, almost impossible expectations. And I also have no illusions that those responsible for the state of affairs we find ourselves in are not going to be sitting by idly, waiting for us to get our act together. So I'm aware of all these challenges. But I also know that South Africans are resilient, and the prosecution and the police are no exceptions. We have allies in this fight. In the NGO sector, you in the media who have done a lot of the investigation work one would have expected from this side of the table in the past. In faith-based organizations, trade unions, and ordinary South Africans who want to win back control of their country. We fully intend to harness their support. We also have support from our counterparts around the world, from investigators and prosecutors who face similar challenges in other countries. So I'm secure in the knowledge that certainly I'm not alone. We are not alone. So that's me. Now, what you came here to hear about. What have we been doing to get this directorate up and running? So I just wanted to reiterate the mandate and the scope of the work of the directorate. It's set out in the proclamation published by the President in the Government Gazette. We are required to focus on serious, complex, and high-profile corruption, particularly those emanating from the commissions of inquiry into state capture, the PIC, as well as the Commission of Inquiry into SARS. So we've envisaged at the outset to focus operations on the following three broad areas, themes, work streams. The first is corruption in the security sector, specifically the criminal justice system. We want to ensure that we restore the integrity of government. we need to, and in order to do that, we need to get our own house in order first. The public needs to have confidence that those who need to address this problem are able and capable and have the integrity to do so. The next big focus area will be our state-owned enterprises. No surprises there. Eskom, Transnet, Prasa, and a few others. And then a third area would be high-level public and private sector corruption. Yes, that is the other category. But the idea is to focus on those who have systematically and actively sought to corrupt government procurement systems and processes for private gain. So, our operations. It's envisaged that we will only take on a very small number of cases. So our case selection criteria will ensure that we address those who planned, orchestrated, and instigated the corruption of the system, and those who ultimately derived the benefit of the looting of state coffers. Not only those foot soldiers who were merely implementing their corrupt schemes. So we want to address those who actively and systematically weakened the capacity of the criminal justice system to ensure that the corrupt escaped accountability for their crimes. So we're aware that there's a general frustration with the failure on the part of the criminal justice system as a whole to deal with serious corruption. What that means for the Directorate is that there will be intense pressure to take on every case of corruption that has been out there. We want to emphasize that the Investigating Directorate is not a replacement for the existing structures. We are not taking over the mandates of the people at this table and other institutions in the criminal justice system. Our role is to address high-level corruption and the particular crisis that we face at this point in our country. Our approach will be a coordinated one because what we don't take on will have to be adequately addressed by other parts of the system. So our case selection criteria will be mindful of and aligned to that of the other role players in the system, particularly the DPCI, the Hawks. We've been consulting with DPPs, Directors of Public Prosecution, and the Hawks on the boundaries of our respective mandates to ensure that we avoid duplication, or even worse, we avoid cases falling through the cracks. And we're also aware that there's no need for competition. Unfortunately, there's more than enough work to go around. So, mindful of the need to take swift action in the short term, we're aware that people are waiting and many are reserving judgment until they see action. As the NDPP indicated, I've already been working with my colleague, Andrea Johnson, to determine the status of cases already being dealt with in the NPA. She has identified many of the challenges that need to be addressed in order to make swift progress on these cases. And so for cases that fall within the mandate and that meet our case intake criteria, the immediate focus will be on coordinating, overseeing, and strengthening our capability and our capacity to ensure successful investigation, prosecution, and the recovery of assets. So personnel working on these cases will remain part of these teams, provided they agree to subject themselves to the enhanced integrity screening and vetting and have the skill and capacity to perform at the required level. They will come in to work with the Directorate. So we are in the process of establishing a core operational team, a very small team, to lead the Directorate alongside me. And in that regard, I'm very pleased to be able to say that we have procured the services of Advocate Jeff Budlander, SC, Senior Counsel at the Cape Bar, to provide strategic legal advice on a range of topics relating to preparing these cases for court. We have also secured the return to the NPA of Advocate Tanda Mwengwe, the former operational head of the Scorpions, who was seconded to Swaziland, where he headed up the anti-corruption agency in that country. In addition, we have been working closely with the police, particularly the DPCI, who have made available staff to work with us in the establishment phase. Similarly, colleagues from the Financial Intelligence Center, the Special Investigating Unit, the South African Revenue Services, and the State Security Agency have all pledged their support in ensuring that Directorate makes a success of its endeavors. We've also had several engagements, as the NDPP alluded, to the private sector, and particularly with bodies like Business Against Crime, SABRIC, the accounting and the legal profession, to look at innovative and cost-effective ways to access skill and capacity in the private sector rapidly. The responses we've received have been overwhelmingly positive. We also intend to engage civil society, not only to provide input on specific investigations they have found in the past, but also to look for ways in which civil society can continue to hold the Directorate to fulfilling its mandate. Just a word on recruitment more generally. The NPA Act does not envisage that we appoint staff on a permanent basis into the Directorate, but rather it envisages that we select a matter for an investigation and then identify the skill and capacity needed to address that particular problem. And so it envisages that we source skill and capacity from wherever it exists, be it within the public sector or in the private sector. And so once brought into the Directorate, personnel will dedicate themselves full-time to the Directorate for the duration of the assignment. So reassignment from elsewhere in the public service, and in some cases secondments, will be the basis on which staff will be recruited from within the public sector. We also aim to recruit from the private sector, legal, investigative, forensic, computer skills, on a contract basis. The principle is, however, that whoever is recruited or assigned to work in the Directorate will be subjected to security vetting and to initial and ongoing enhanced integrity testing. Lifestyle audits will be the order of the day. Personnel will therefore need to agree to subject themselves to these enhanced measures. As I indicated in the beginning, I'm alive to the challenges we face, but I'm confident that we have in this country what it takes to make it work. I'm enthusiastic, I'm keen, and I'm committed, and I'm thrilled to be back in the public sector fighting the good fight. But I'm also equally clear that there is no magic wand, despite what you read about in the papers, although, I meant to bring one to and we are no superheroes. We don't have our costumes in the back there. But what we do have is all of you, every South African who wants to turn things around. And so with that, I know we can do this. Thank you. I'm swapping with you. Am I swapping with you? You're coming here now. Yeah. Commissioner, would you like to? No, we don't want to. Are you okay? Or you too?
All right.
Kind of musical chairs, yes.
It's the change of chairs.
Sorry.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe as the South African, on behalf of the South African Police Service, I would like to pledge our support to the NPA, but it's not only support per se. I think SAPS has got a turnaround vision. And in terms of the turnaround vision, there's provision in the turnaround vision for an integrated strategy between the South African Police Service and the NPA. So this initiative that is coming into play today is actually part and parcel of the integrated strategy. And it's part and parcel of a long journey, which we refer to as, in terms of our theme, on a journey to a safer South Africa. There's few things that are critical that we will be dealing with together with the NPA in terms of the integrated strategy. One of them is coming up with a resource matrix between the NPA and SAPS. I think as we are improving, working on the ratios, balancing the ratio of the police to the public, the same will apply to the NPA, because if we update the ratio without looking at the NPA, it's going to clog the NPA. Now, as a result, part and parcel of what we're looking at in the integrated resource strategy, it's looking at a resource matrix between ourselves so that we complement each other. But the most important, it's a complementary and an integrated performance management system. SAPS cannot perform better than NPA, and NPA cannot perform better than SAPS. We can only perform better outside there in the public. So it's just confirmation that this is part and parcel of a strategic and a shared vision for the wing the direction of the country. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you may want to come closer.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen of the
Come closer.
No questions. Okay, so you know how to do it. Please raise your hand when you're about to speak. You identify yourself and the media house you represent, and tell us to whom you're directing your question. Thank you. Anita, I'll take the three at a time. So Anita, Mendy, and yourself want to speak. Should I go? 1, 2. Do I need a mic?
Yeah, man.
Is there a mic?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the notes. Colin Hansen from the Sunday Times newspaper. I have a series of questions. We'll start with the NDPP advocate. Where are you going to get money from? Your plan is heavily dependent on resources. Where are you going to get this money from? Secondly, are you in talks, or are you considering replacing one of your deputies, Nomtobo Jiba, and Special Directors Lawrence Maybe? What are the talks or the considerations around that particular issue? Advocate Junior, will you or can you announce the first cases that you've isolated? Can you tell us? And also, are you going to announce it on an ad hoc basis, which cases that you particularly are going to investigate? And then what determines who is sort of the masterminds in the cases that you're going to sort of consider? And how are you going to guard against the same accusation that was leveled against the Scorpions, in that you were that there is some sort of vendetta or political motive that sort of dictates why some cases are pursued over others. Moving on to the other members of the panel, to the Hawks Head, General Libya, I understand that this may not be the time, but I just really want to know what is the case or the situation with a member of your team, Major General Zinhle Mnenobi, who was referred to as the first sort of victim of state capture, and particularly what General Advocate Cronje says about the integrity of the criminal justice system being weakened. So what is the status of Major General Zinhle Mnenobi, and is she in your office? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First,
Thank you. Mandy Wiener from News 24, and welcome and congratulations. Firstly, just regarding your strategy around competency, which you rightly acknowledge is going to be a huge issue for you. Your idea of going out and looking to the private sector, into other organizations, is obviously going to be very expensive. Are you expecting the country's private sector and corporates to perhaps support you in this endeavor? Are you hoping that they will second people to you for free, essentially? Or what is your strategy around that? And is there a call on the private sector to help you out here, to rebuild? And then I understand that obviously for political reasons the generals are sitting next to you, but would you have preferred, and do you think it would have helped the public confidence if you had a Scorpions type unit within the NPA rather than an investigating directorate, which obviously sees you relying on the Hawks and the police investigators? Would you have preferred that troika type approach? And then just lastly, what is your relationship like with the investigators at the State Capture Inquiry? And what is happening around the Bosasa case there? Are you concerned that if you prosecute now in relation to the State Capture Inquiry, that it could put off people going to the inquiry to testify while that inquiry is ongoing? Thank you.
Well, my two colleagues have taken two of my questions, so that's going to be easy. My name is Peter Dutoy, also from News 24 Advocate. But my first question to you. You've spoken about restoring integrity in institutions, the integrity of the National Prosecuting Authority. Can you give us some detail into what you found when you arrived here? In the media and in the public at large, we've been seeing the challenges that the NPA have had over the last decade or so. It's been difficult to get proper insight into what the status of the NPA and the state of the NPA was. Can you give us some insight? And then a short one, and adding on to my colleagues, Advocate Cronje, how close are we to seeing the first state capture related case go to court? As you rightly said, there is an insatiable thirst for justice. So can you give us some time frames? Thank you.
Okay.
That's the first one. I'm not sure how we're going to do this with moving around the microphone.
Let's start with those.
But the first one's, where's the money going to come from? Cronje has a little more detail about the budget, but as far as the investigating directorate is concerned, we have assurances, and we know that Treasury will make the money available to us. So you can maybe say a little bit more about that, but as far as the directorate is concerned, I have no doubt that it will be properly funded. It will receive the money that it needs to do its work. As far as the rest of the NPA is concerned, that is more of a battle. And it's really important for me to stress what Advocate Cronje said, that the directorate will only deal with a small number of cases, but the number of corruption cases out there is massive. I mean, we have seen almost endemic levels of corruption. So we really need to capacitate the rest of the NPA as well as the Hawks, because a large proportion of that will be dealt with in the SCCU and with the Hawks. And so if the NPA doesn't receive the resources for us to be able to address the massive amount of corruption out there, we're going to be failing our country. And so it's hugely important. Part of my key, or my first tasks when the new minister is appointed, is to really look at how we could access more money for the NPA more generally, so that we can address the scourge of corruption, as well as, other crimes. Corruption is not the only crime facing our country, but I know it's hugely important for the country to move forward, that we actually deal with corruption effectively. But there's a whole range of other crimes that the NPA needs to deal with effectively. And so if we really want to give justice to victims across, all victims that are, victims of crime, that we need to better resource the NPA, and that is a huge problem for the NPA at this point. So hopefully we'll be able to, hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel in that regard. And then the question about the previous Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions and Advocate Jipa and Advocate Morebi. As you know, the matter is currently before Parliament, and so once I'm aware of what the final outcome of that is, I will be able to make decisions with regard to possible replacements. Thank you. The first cases, maybe.
So just on the budget, we obviously are in an environment of scarce resources, but so it does compel us to be creative about how we go about funding the directorate. So we've put together a budget. I mean, the challenge is we have no idea, or we have some idea, of the extent of what we will be doing. We just don't know exactly how that will pan out. So what we've done is we've modeled ourselves on the commission, the Zondo Commission, the State Capture Commission, chaired by the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, to sort of baseline our budget for the next 3 years. There's 6 months left of this budget cycle, and we've been assured that in the adjustment estimates, the directorate will be catered for. But it's also a question of the ability to spend that money speedily that we need to look at. So the Act very much envisages secondments and short-term contracts being the order of the day, and it's how we go about procuring that skill. We have also put together a bid from the Criminal Assets Recovery account, the account in which we put the proceeds of crime recovered by the Asset Forfeiture Unit. And there's a healthy balance in that account, and we have applied for a fair chunk of that money, and feel very confident that we have a very strong proposal to be allocated that money. The bulk of that money is for non-recurring expenditure, so we can spend it on skills, forensic skills, private sector forensic, and legal skills, which is what we intend to do.
First cases.
The first cases. So I don't think we'll be announcing in advance who we will be swooping on initially. But what I can tell you is, as I've said, we've sat with Advocate Johnson and we've looked through the cases already in the system. And many of them are well advanced. What we need to do is ensure that we understand the full picture. That before we proceed, although we won't initially proceed against what has been referred to as the masterminds, we want to know that we have a reasonable understanding of who that is and how we will address those people. So what the role we're going to play in relation to those cases that we have already identified as cases that are closest to court readiness is to put them through a process of sort of peer review to ensure that they are as ready as we've been led to believe.
Who determines who's the mastermind?
Who determines who the masterminds are? The evidence will determine who the masterminds are, but what often happens in cases is we are either too overwhelmed by the vastness of the scheme and where ultimately the tentacles reach, that we are paralyzed to act against those that there is a relatively strong case against. So our sense is that we want to act against those where the case is already fairly solid. But we want to, at the same time, develop our capacity and understanding, as I've said. So it's a balancing act that we will be figuring out as we go along. But our commitment ultimately is that unless we're having an impact at the very top, we're not really going to be solving the problem. So that's why we will spend far more energy and focus on that. And that's something the criminal justice system struggles with around the world. There's a struggle to work on the cases that take long, that are hard. And so that's why I don't think you will expect to hear from us every other week. But when we do act, you ought to have the confidence that we are getting at the root of the problem.
Private sector funding.
Private sector funding. So it's related to just thinking about the budget. We have been inundated with Tumamina offers of assistance, and on an individual level, but also institutions like the bar, like the SABRIC, the Banking Council, have come and have put on the table creative ways in which they think we can address the problem. So that is why I am particularly encouraged that we are not alone. There have been so many offers of assistance that the challenge is, trying to use all of them as efficiently and as quickly as everyone is excited to give it. So what your question was, is this a call to the private sector? It is, but we have also resolved to make the call more formally. So there will be communication in the next few weeks about exactly the logistics around how we will procure private sector skill. But obviously, the cheaper the better, but we won't compromise on quality. And obviously there's also the vetting requirements, because we anticipate that offers will come from all quarters, not just those with a genuine intention to assist.
And whether you prefer the Scorpion type as opposed
So
to...
that was for you. We're just passing that bucket. No.
I think, look, there's one or two things. Sorry, it's just on guarding against. There was a question about, against, like the Scorpions were attacked, and political motives, etc. That's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. We are going to be accused of pursuing persons for political and other motives, and we expect that, we will personally be attacked as well, for various reasons. And we hope that when that does happen, that civil society and those that want to fight the good fight will be behind us to ensure that we actually do hold people accountable, irrespective. Because this has got nothing to do with any agendas. It's all about the evidence, and it's all about solving the massive corruption problem that we have in South Africa. As far as the, would we have preferred a Scorpion type? To be honest, the powers that this directorate is going to have is very similar to what the Scorpions had. So as far as the powers that are concerned that the director would have, it's very similar. But I think we actually need to work closely with our partners in the police, and we certainly don't want to be in a position where we have those turf wars that existed between SAPS and the police. So I think in as much as we have to deal with getting the right people, and we need to ensure that the vetting and other processes that we put in place to ensure that we have people that are not corrupt that come into the space. I'm actually really looking forward to dealing with our partners in law enforcement, because remember, this is not a permanent solution. This is, as what the commissioner has called, it's a project. It's a temporary project for us to deal with a crisis that the country is facing. And so moving forward, SAPS and the NPA need to take lessons from this and to ensure that we can mainstream, the good lessons that we take from this project to ensure corruption is not going to end, and all the other crimes, hopefully we will be able to have better impact. But law enforcement and NPA need to be able to deal with this effectively. So I'm very pleased with the current structure as far as this is concerned. And then I'm just checking if there are any other questions for me before I hand over. what did I find at the NPA when I arrived? Why do you ask such difficult questions? Well, you've heard a lot about it. The commissions of inquiry have actually helped me in that regard. But all I can say is that I found huge challenges. I can safely say I think it was worse than I expected, but also very committed and dedicated staff. And I want to say that to start off with, there is an absolute groundswell of good, dedicated prosecutors just wanting to do their jobs better and working under very difficult conditions. And the problems with credibility in the NPA were largely one of leadership at different levels. And that is, I'm trying to reflect on some of the things that have really, as a prosecutor, I've thought, I couldn't imagine that things could have happened in the NPA. When we are the defenders of the Constitution, we need to uphold the values in the Constitution, and that is why we do what we do, is to ensure that justice wins. And so when I've been talking to a number of people, and when I look at certain cases and I look at what some of the staff have been telling me here about what went on here, they were persecution of certain prosecutors as well. And so, those that wanted to fight the good fight had a really hard time. And so, I think it was hugely disappointing that as defenders of the prosecution, defenders of the Constitution, that the NPA could have, I look at some of the decisions and I think, how could we have taken these decisions? And we're reviewing many of those. And so I think it was a very disappointing experience for me, because, I feel in many ways we failed the people of South Africa, and law enforcement generally did. But as I said when I started off, there's a lot of very, very good people in the NPA, and I'm sure that share the vision of a new NPA. And so, notwithstanding the challenges that we face internally, and we haven't by any means addressed all of them, I'm confident that together we can move forward in the NPA, and we can really restore the credibility of the NPA. It won't be easy, because as you know, it takes a long time to build credibility and trust, but it's very quick to ruin that. So it's going to take a while, but I know that we are on the right track with the good people in the NPA. Thank you. I think Commissioner was there. I'm not sure we're gonna.
Answer from you.
Maybe if we pass this, would that work? Or you? If I'm not sure if that will work.
Just answer for him.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. The question that has been directed to me is regarding one of my
good presentation. If we prosecute, could they put?
Is still in the office, the status thereof. You shall have observed initially when the issues were raised in the State Commission that we went back to the South African Police Service discipline regulations. We instituted an investigation, and to ensure that we also give an opportunity, we suspended. As the regulation requires that this suspension need to be for a specific period, that is what we have applied. In terms of the discipline regulations, after completion of the departmental investigation, we decided to charge her departmentally. The process of discipline one departmentally, although it's not the same as in criminal court, it's more or less in the same direction. Advocates were appointed to preside over. The others were representing the employer who took the matter forward. So the hearing took place. Those who made allegation in the State Commission testified before this disciplinary panel. The employer closed its case, and then it was for the employee to present the case. Unfortunately, the employee is unwell, is at this moment in hospital. We wish her speedy recovery. So the process is going on. So that is the current status. She is in the office. She has been assigned other responsibilities other than to do the anti-corruption investigation. In that space, we have appointed another Major General to be acting until such time that the matter is disposed of. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, the last one on our relationship with the State Capture Commission and Bosasa quickly. We've been working quite closely with the State Capture Commission. The volume of information at the Commission has been mind-boggling. And so we've been working with them on a capacity to analyze and interrogate the data that they have. We've also agreed to work more closely on witnesses that are testifying to make sure that if there are witnesses that we intend to use in criminal cases, that we share that information and plan and strategize accordingly. So we are working very closely. The NDPP has appointed 2 people in the NPA more broadly, but we have also in addition been engaging with the NPA. And I just wanted to say on Mandy's question about the Scorpions, because you mentioned specifically the Troika principle. What the Directorate does have that is was unique to the Scorpions and isn't really replicated elsewhere in the system is that we have under one roof analysis, investigation, and prosecution skill and capacity under single line of command almost. So, and as far as I'm concerned, that was the great strength of the Scorpions. But on the question on Bosasa, Bosasa and probably even Estina, these are cases that have already been before courts. And so they are higher up on the priority list to ensure that we address whatever the outstanding issues were and that we move speedily on those cases. But that's all that I think we want to say at this stage about specific cases. That we have a strategy to prioritize, we have a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy, and you'll have to judge us by actions. Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on to the next round, I just need to announce that the National Commissioner is here away. We are preparing all the there's the inauguration of the President tomorrow, and he's very central in the management of logistics and everything. So he's going to need to be excused. And so maybe if there are 2 questions, this is already answered one, 2 questions are directed to the National Commissioner so that then we can be excused. I mean, we're really grateful that he actually took time away from where he was supposed to be, because it's very, he was supposed to be the whole day. So 2, just for the National Commissioner, 2 questions, and then we will let the National Commissioner know. It's also good if there are none, because then the National Commissioner can be very...
Good day, Barry Bateman, Eyewitness News. My question is not to the Commissioner per se, but it is relevant to the Commissioner. Advocate, you were talking about working closely with your counterparts in the criminal justice sector, taking on cases that are already established, working with IPID, and then you talked about you're not going to get into the situation of a turf war between infighting and so on. But I'm already identifying a conflict of interest on the panel sitting here, in that the General himself is the subject of an investigation by IPID. In a very serious matter involving tender fraud of the procurement related to, I think it was a crime intelligence matter. So already you're sitting with somebody at a high level within the organization. How do you anticipate dealing with this particular difficulty, considering you're sitting with a suspect of an IPID investigation at this stage?
Is that the Commissioner?
I think I'll take that first. I think all I can say to everyone from the President downwards, if we get evidence, you'll be prosecuted. But in the meantime, we need to do a job together.
And just to add, the state of affairs in the criminal justice system is as I go around looking for people to work with, every time I mention a name, eyebrows get raised and I get warned that, oh, you have to be careful about that person. So it's virtually impossible to go on the gossip, rumor and speculation that is out there. What the National Director has, the assurance she has given is that if there's evidence, we will deal with you, we will address you. And we have the space, the independence to do our job. So unfortunately for the Commissioner, if the evidence points to his culpability, he will be dealt with. But I can't say that I'm at that point by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
Thank you.
National Commissioner, we appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you.
A comment to make before you leave.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Yeah. Second round. Okay, fourth one where I go around. Okay, then there's forest. Here 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks, Budela, for looking to this side in the end. My name is Moloko Mloto from DNCA. I just want to know the names of the Gupta brothers has been mentioned several times in that commission. We are aware they are out of the country. Does it mean they are scot-free? They will never be touched because they are not in the country. The second question relates to the statement that was made by the leader of the EFF, Mr. Julius Malema, during the launch of his party manifesto. He was clear that he has no confidence in you, Advocate Vetohi. He believes that you are here essentially as a henchman. And now I want to ask specifically, given the fact that a case against him several years back was struck off the roll, whether that case is among the cases you are considering, you are reviewing and considering to reinstitute.
Good morning, my name is Mule from Open News. Firstly, Advocate, I'd like to say congratulations on the appointment. Just for record purposes, I know some of these cases you're dealing with are quite complex and highly profile cases implicating political leaders, especially looking at revelations emanating from the state capture inquiry and other inquiries as well. Do we have like a time frame of how long some of these cases can actually take? I mean, we know a lot of South Africans are actually hungry to see prosecutions actually taking place, as some of these cases have been dragging for quite some time. And number two, I just wanted to know, how are we going to deal with political interference? Because we know some of these parties have large constituencies whereby if they utter something, their backup or supporters would rather go against the prosecuting authority and believe in the party. How are you willing to work with that? Thank you.
Advocates, Claudia Manovich from Business Day. I just wanted to find out, Advocate Toy, specifically when you spoke about the review of high-profile cases that the NPA is currently conducting, does that review include, as we most prominently would have seen in the inquiry of Advocate Jiba Mugwebi, looking into the prosecution of Richard Mdluli, as well as Johan Boysen, which was two of the cases which was most prominently dealt with? And then just in terms of Advocate Jiba, I know during the inquiry they did speak in terms of there was not a lot of clarity in terms of whether she would be charged for perjury or not. There was some informal message being sent from her advocate at that stage, from her legal team at that stage, that she wouldn't be prosecuted for perjury, and that was the decision taken. But as of yet, we don't know anything formally what the decision is. And just a softer question for Advocate Cronje. You said it was a very long, it was a difficult decision to make. It wasn't taken lightly. But was there anything specifically that made you go, okay, this is the moment I will definitely do it? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Pelani Pahali. I'm from Newsroom Africa. Just the first one from me, Advocate Bahadur Freire. Is it part of your reviewed or those which are in process, cases which are in process? It seemed as if the NPA was not initially ready on the first time. Are you perhaps looking into ensuring that it's back on the wall? And remember that the Concord ruled that the former Social Development Minister, Dr. Kamini, said that she should be prosecuted for perjury. Is that something that you are perhaps as well looking into? And last one from me is former Sasa COO Angela Grisi said some damning stuff about Mr. Watson. He said he had deep tentacles within the NPA. That's something that is worrying you in your work. You said there's something that you are not happy with, perhaps, when the state of the NPA of which you have found it in. Will you be looking into ensuring that everybody's work is working, and of course there's no kind of a stooge for someone else?
Okay, yes, everybody.
The Guptas, maybe you want to deal with that one first. The question is, are they gone? You want to deal with that first?
I'm happy. The question was, the Guptas are out of the country, does that mean they escape liability? So I spent the last 5 or 6 years working for the Stolen Assets Recovery Initiative, which is a joint initiative between the World Bank and the UNODC. And I worked in countries like Tanzania, Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Ukraine, and the main job is to recover the proceeds of crime. So that's certainly a big area of work that I'm very excited to be doing. And also, this is not in relation to the Gupta specifically. Anyone who tries to evade justice by just fleeing our borders, the international community has made unbelievable steps in working together to ensure that there is accountability. So I'm, in Dubai, for example, the UAE, we now have a bilateral agreement to support and facilitate those kinds of things. So, as I've said in the past at numerous fora, and it relates to the last question of what made me come back, is we have amongst the most progressive, most advanced legislation in this country, in the world. We just need to be using the legislation. So we just need to step up to the plate. So we certainly plan to use all the tools at our disposal to address those that need to be addressed.
Frida Dairy Farm, he asked.
And the Frida Dairy Farm, I think I already alluded to. That is a case that has already made it onto the court roll. And in our prioritization, we have looked at cases that are already in court to address what were the problems and try to resolve them. So certainly that one is on the list.
Time frame for cases.
The time frame for cases, that is quite a tricky one, because you look at cases like Frida Dairy, and it was a case where prosecutors decided this case is ready, let's go. And even now in the review, the more you look at it and the more you talk to the Commission and its sources, the more things expand. So it's about how to tackle the elephant, and we're deciding to take bite-sized chunks, but I think prosecutors will all be having their jaws dropped if I committed to a time frame within which we will be ready. But I assure you that we are not unaware of the expectations and are not ignoring the need to act swiftly.
And I'll just add to that, they say when you go after the king, you've got to make sure you kill him. And basically it means you've got to have a watertight case, We will be attacked, not just the evidence, but from various avenues, from various and quarters. And, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we don't rush with cases, that we do bear in mind the expectations of the country, but also that we have solid cases. And so that is really, really important. But at the same time, we are aware we need to demonstrate that the wheels of justice are turning. And so we will be looking, at various other cases, but people have to understand that, these cases, we cannot go to court and have another Estina Dairy debacle where cases are withdrawn because, we haven't properly investigated it. So it's really important. So to understand that some of these key cases that people are waiting for accountability might take a bit longer than people would like to, but at least we must get it right. The other questions on politicians having expressed no confidence in me. As I've said, opinions will abound, and people will say good things today and bad things tomorrow, or vice versa. And my view is that I don't really care about what people say, because there will be opinions. I say to Bulalwa, I don't want to know what's going on in Twitter. I know what I have to do. That's the focus, not I mean, that sounds a bit too arrogant. We know what we need to do as the NPA, and I know what as a leader I need to do. So that's our goal. There will be whisperings and there will be all kinds of allegations, but we have to ignore that and ensure that we are pursuing justice. And so, and hopefully when the allegations become too bad, that we will have people out there that will be supporting the NPA, because they know we are fighting the good fight. Cases being reviewed. We have, yes, we are certainly looking at those cases involving the politicians that have been mentioned. We're reviewing the cases of all the names that have been mentioned. Business Day, yes, to your questions as well. The perjury matter, we're waiting for the outcome of the parliamentary process, and then a decision will be made in that case. And how are we going to, the tentacles are deep in the NPA. Well, I'm aware of allegations, and so we certainly looking, and the Zondo Commission, the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, has not yet completed its work. So what I can say is that, we will look to all of these allegations, and where people are guilty of impropriety, we will deal with them. I have said to prosecutors, as I'm traveling throughout the country as well, there's no place for corruption in the NPA. But I know that there is corruption. There are corrupt prosecutors, and they are very good prosecutors. And I've said to them that we will be absolutely ruthless in dealing with prosecutors that are corrupt. There's no place for prosecutors. We are defenders of the Constitution, and you can't have corrupt prosecutors that are prosecuting people for corruption. So yes, there have been allegations, and there are processes in place, and I'm looking into all of them.
What convinced me to take the job is I left very reluctantly.
Like me.
But outside, I was living a very comfortable life, and thought, who needs this kind of stress and trouble? I think what persuaded me is I sat the NDPP down and said, okay, I need to wrap up now the support I've been giving you in the last few months. And I realized I won't be involved anymore. I won't be able to be in there and make this happen. And I thought, so if anything, it was the fear that I won't get to do what I now get to do.
Thank you very much. Last round. We have to act on those cases. So this will be the last round, and it's Mandy and yes. will you please identify yourself number 3? And we're closing it,
Sorry, I'm banging this drum about competency. General Olivia, if I can ask you, it applies to both of you really, but there has been a bleeding of resources to the private sector. My understanding is there are no longer forensic accountants that are working at the Hawks. I'm trying to get my head around the strategy of going to the private sector or relying on kind of short-term contracts. What is the long-term strategy to rebuild these institutions? Specifically, how are you going to get young people back in? How are you going to get experienced people? All of those investigators that have gone to audit firms or to law firms, what is the strategy around that, and how are we going to build competency long-term? And if you can maybe just elaborate more on the day-to-day functioning of this investigative directorate. How is it actually going to work in terms of going to consultants and working around that? If you can maybe just talk more nuts and bolts about how it's actually going to work.
Good morning, advocates. Good morning, General. Pretoria from the NCA. Just on a general point, you spoke about failing the citizens of South Africa. Now, transparency is obviously an extremely important part of that. Like the police do every year, they do have crime stats, etc., etc. And there's sort of been a lack from the NPA, just in terms of communicating some successes and or problems that you have. Is there by any chance, I assume you won't have that information offhand, for instance, the amount of corruption cases currently on the roll, and successes in prosecuting, would that be some type of things, serious and violent crimes, etc.? Is that something that you would actually look into to communicate more to South Africans to ensure the transparency and more faith? Thank you.
Really hard to decide, Uhuru Productions. I just want to follow on that question in terms of transparency. The NPA is set up in a way where you do work behind closed doors. Can you just, I think it would be important to outline how the enhanced integrity test relates to that nature of your operation in a way. That's the general question. The more specific question, it would be the bilateral agreement with Dubai. I mean, the attractiveness of that jurisdiction for investment is its secrecy, is its opaqueness. What do you believe you can actually achieve through that bilateral agreement? What information will you be able to get your hands on?
Okay.
We'll start first. Okay, we'll start first, and then General will follow. So maybe you want to, skills, capacity.
Well, it's a topic I get very excited about. Reinvigorating professionalism in the prosecution and upping our games in terms of skills. In the private sector, I worked with forensic accountants that just would blow my mind away. And so one of the things I've been thinking about is how in the public sector we can have access to that skill in an efficient and cost-effective way. You'll know that when we started in asset forfeiture with Willie Hofmeyer, one of the first things we did was consider recruiting a forensic accountant to have on staff full-time to help us follow the money. The person earned, I think, more than the national director at the time, had about 3 years of work experience, and after a couple of months we realized was not really being productively utilized, and it did not give us the kind of expertise that you would get from someone located in an institution where they're doing this work on a daily basis. So that was not necessarily, getting those people permanently on staff is not necessarily the solution. The other thing that we must recognize is that in South Africa, the private forensic investigation space was booming. There There was no shortage of work. People got mandates to do investigations, sometimes the same investigation over and over and over again without anything happening. So one of the things we did early on is call together the accounting profession, because it, of course, is doing its own soul searching and looking at how it got itself into trouble. And we are trying to fashion a model that can work. It looks like we will need to, if we want to recruit at a very senior level, look at retired experienced practitioners and have them in a role where they advise on mandates, because that's also been a big issue, that people get given a mandate and the scope creeps, and before you know it, I mean, in some cases that wasn't normal, it was corruption, where, you know, contracts balloons to 10, 20, 100 times the initial agreed price. So we are also looking at models around the world and seeing how this kind of skill is available, made available around the country. One thing I'm sure about is that, you know, people don't do work for law enforcement for the money, trust me. They do it because they're passionate and they're driven by what you can do in the space. And so I already see people wanting to return, even though working in the private sector is much more lucrative. So the more we make this a space where you can actually do the work that investigators and prosecutors need to do, the more, and we just need to be creative about finding. So I don't have, we're going to recruit so many. We are looking at a mechanism for having those skills available. And what we said is that we're not going to have people in this directorate, what's the word, on a permanent basis, you know, the security of tenure. Because what we want to do is identify the task and then assess the skills that we need for that task. So we won't have people sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for work to come. They will work on an assignment, and once they've done that, they will go back into their home departments and carry on there. And the private sector recognizes that those are valuable skills, and that this is an amazing training ground for those skills. What we need to ensure is that we retain expertise within, we manage the vetting, we manage the integrity issues, and we manage to keep our secrets and not let them be available to our opponents the very next day. So there's some complexity, but we are working, and I know the Hawks have been grappling with this very problem for a while themselves. So I don't know if I should hand over to the General to add to that.
And then come back to, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The question of bleeding resources in the DPCI and what is the long-term strategy. Indeed, we have analyzed the situation in the DPCI. You will recall that in some spaces we have indicated that we lost a number of people who were trained in this environment, and no less than 100 were lost since 2015, and some of them we have already recruited them back into the DPCI. Also, there is another element of secondment, which is how we capacitate on a temporary basis. We have, as we speak, seconded 38 members from the greater SAPS to assist in the capacity. But we have also conducted a work study to say that is the structure that we have in the DPCI designed to match the crime situation in the country. And that work study, I think that is almost finalized. We are just now consulting the last minister in terms of the act, because the act prescribes who are the ministers that need to be consulted when you deal with this. We believe that by next month we shall have finalized knowing precisely how many we need. Among those that we have is again the post of forensic accountants. in the past those posts were advertised, and as my colleague is saying, we couldn't attract the people at that level of brigadier. Is very high in our space, but to attract chartered accountants and the like, forensic accountants, is not. But we are still going to do that one. And again, it has been indicated that we normally make use of those in the field of forensic accounting, because it's a matter of giving them a mandate that in this specific one we need a chartered accountant. It's not all the cases that you need chartered accountant. So that is how we are dealing with the strategy of long-term capacitating ourselves with regard to various areas, including the chartered accountant space. Thank you.
Thank you. See, the sad reality about corruption, it's not just about the money that has left the country, it's about the money it's costing us to hold people to account. And these investigations are incredibly expensive. So that's just another ripple effect of corruption. On the transparency issue, yes, you know, we need to look at, you're right, now that I come to think of it, I don't think the NPA has been releasing any statistics publicly. What I can say to you is that the number of really serious, complex corruption cases that were dealt with last year, I could probably count on my one hand. There have been cases that have been dealt with, you know, and I don't even think there have been any person that's gone to prison for corruption. I think there was one case recently where there was a prison sentence. I'm talking about your high-level complex corruption cases. So clearly, you know, we need to relook at an overarching NPA strategy. The directorate is one part of dealing with corruption, but there's massive amount of corruption. And so we will internally, I agree with you, part of the vision of the new NPA, if you look at, you know, in fact, we are having a strategy planning session next week with the senior managers of the NPA, which is, I think, happening for the first time in maybe more than 5 years. But it's about us invigorating ourselves and moving together as one PA. And one of the pillars of the new vision is transparency. And we really need to unpack that, look at what does it actually mean to be a transparent NPA. And so we do need to give, you know, certain decisions for reasons for certain decisions and all kinds of things. But yes, and that will build confidence and trust. But as I've said, and as Hermione just mentioned, you know, we could sit here and say all kinds of things. At the end of the day, we would be judged on what we do by the actions of the NPA. And but certainly that transparency is one of the key pillars, and we will look at what a transparent NPA looks like and what we need to do to ensure that we could actually give effect to that. Yeah, we weren't quite sure about the question relating to the integrity issue relating to transparency. So if you could please clarify, that would be useful. And then there's the issue of the Dubai. You maybe just want to touch on that.
What decisions aren't open to public scrutiny? So what is the link between that and the enhanced integrity test? I'm really trying to get you to articulate the importance of the integrity.
They're just testing.
The cadre inside the authority, because you are not open to public scrutiny.
I mean, I think the reason why we're struggling is because many of our decisions are subject to intense public scrutiny. Whenever we decide to prosecute, or you will see in the courts on a daily basis whether we made the right decision or not, so there's intense scrutiny there. When we decline to prosecute, there's often review processes, and we have to answer for those decisions. So there's certainly accountability. And definitely we do have very strict rules around confidentiality, if that's the issue you're getting at. there are strict rules around confidentiality and what private information can be communicated, and usually is that they should not be communicated. But that is not the reason, or that is not why we are not transparent and accountable. We can balance accountability and transparency with the need to protect confidential information.
Dubai.
Dubai, that's why the STAR initiative exists, because safe havens like Dubai and the others who used to be called safe havens are a lot less safe because of the activism around opening up and greater transparency in those safe havens. But the UAE remains one of the hardest nuts to crack. There are many ways, though, to skin a cat. And one of the things we've already done is just to understand from our side what steps did we in fact take to secure the extradition of people in UAE, and what requests have been sent and what follow-up has there been. So just a proper understanding of what is actually going on, what efforts did we in fact make. And coupled with that, I think it's public knowledge that the UAE will be hosting the UN Conference of State Parties conference in December this year, which puts it in a very awkward position around challenges to its transparency and assistance to countries dealing with corruption. So we think it's a good time for seeking and procuring the assistance of the UAE, and we intend to do that, properly armed with good information. So, but that said, even countries like the US and the UK, who have great leverage, they struggle, and we have had to become adept at finding ways around the problem. And one of the ways around the problem is other jurisdictions who have leverage, who will support our efforts to hold accountable those in our country. I think that's probably all I should say for the moment.
Okay, I think that does it for today's media briefing. Dear media colleagues, thank you very much for your time and attention. Also, just to assure you that this is not the first and the last of the media engagements that we will have with you, particularly the investigating directorate. I know you're looking for real action that's going to be out there. So those who have requested one-on-ones, and we will consider those. So we, to make it fair, we will definitely engage. So if you're not able to do it today, we'll do it next week or the other week. So please bear with us. We really want to talk to you as well. So thank you for coming this morning. I know it was quite a thing to try and get you to Pretoria, especially those from Joburg, to come all the way. Thank you very much. We appreciate your attention. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.